Let's turn to the great Tom Fitton, the president of Judicial Watch and the author of A Republic Under Assault. Tom, good to have you with us today.
Hey, good to be with you again, Vince. Thanks for having me.
As you know, the real story is about how Jack Smith was sending a message by going to Subway today. But tell us, what's your takeaway today as we find out that Jack Smith is pursuing Donald Trump yet again with more indictments?
Well, it really completes the politicization of the Justice Department's prosecutorial powers. This grand jury, and I witnessed it firsthand, is going out there to try to destroy the Republican Party. They've been investigating their fundraising operation, investigating state elected officials, citizens participating in the process as they understood they could under the First Amendment, state and federal law related to disputing an election. And by suggesting that the then President of the United States, then candidate for the president, could not explore, comment, and talk about ways to dispute an election. It's just beyond me that any honest prosecutor could think that's appropriate. But of course, this is partisan. You know, I testified to the grand jury. They came in, the prosecutors for Jack Smith's team, and I was a witness. And they just argued with me for 3 hours on these issues about election disputes. And, you know, I was commenting earlier today, Vince, it was like being on Twitter all day dealing with left-wing reply guys.
Yeah.
There was nothing serious about this. And I thought, why am I being questioned on First Amendment activity? The First Amendment's more than about free speech. It's about freedom of association and, as importantly, the right to petition your government. And they want to jail Republicans for petitioning their government over an election dispute that election disputes that happen time and time again in American history, and for the first time in history, they're trying to jail people for doing it in the run-up to another presidential election.
But to believe that Donald Trump had led some sort of illegal coup, the events that actually took place in America have to be completely ignored. Donald Trump left on Inauguration Day in 2021. He went to Mar-a-Lago. He ceded control of the government to the incoming president of the United States. The peaceful transfer of power occurred yet again in the United States of America. You have to ignore all of that in order to build some sort of case that Donald Trump did something illegal, including that he called on people to go to the Capitol peacefully on January 6th and patriotically make their voices heard. You have to ignore literally the evidence.
And you'd have to criminalize speech. I mean, essentially what Trump was doing was figuring out ways to dispute the election, debating it. There was this debate about alternative slates of electors.
Yeah.
There were debates about what could happen in Congress. Certainly, Vice President Pence, he wasn't sure, evidently, what he was going to do till the day of January 6th. So the point is, they've changed the law after that to further clarify things.
Right.
In terms of electoral challenges, which suggests that the original law had all sorts of questions about how it applied.
Yes. And
how it should be analyzed. And, of course, Democrats did this very same thing in 1960 in the John Kennedy contest, where you had an alternative slate of electors, for instance, in Hawaii, that were all ready to go. But, you know, it's different rules for Trump. And I tell you, one way to test whether something's illicit in terms of a prosecution is this a novel application and a revolutionary approach to enforcing the law? Are they indicting and criminalize something for the first time in history?
Yes.
And that's happened with Trump time and time again by Democratic politicians in multiple jurisdictions. Remember, Jack Smith equals Alvin Bragg equals the Attorney General of Michigan, who's just indicted a bunch of septuagenarians for daring to engage in again, this dispute about the election to the Democrats in Fulton County, Georgia. Also, they're all part of a piece.
Also, they are allowing broad categories of crimes to go unindicted. So they're not going after actual criminals in so many places in America. If you're looking for evidence of that, look no further than what's happening in Washington, D.C., where last year over 2/3 of arrests resulted in no prosecutions because the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Matthew Graves, refused to go after the people who were actually arrested for committing crimes in the streets of D.C. Meanwhile, he has used his time to try and pursue thousands of Americans who were either in, around, or knew someone who went to the Capitol on January 6th, 2021, regardless of whether they committed any act of violence whatsoever. So or destruction of property whatsoever. There is no even standard of justice here. It's just corrupt through and through. So you talk about them going after Trump for novel reasons. They're not even going after criminals for legitimate reasons.
No, and of course, when you're a leftist in government, you've got an agenda you're pursuing, and obviously the soft on crime approach is part of that. To me, it's perfectly consistent. They're not there to mete out justice and protect the public safety. They're there to achieve political goals, and doing so, they've changed. There have been political prosecutions by the Justice Department in the past, but never has it been so naked, never has it been so brazen. And I tell you, if we've crossed this Rubicon, I think we've actually not only crossed it, we're in undiscovered country. And I hope there's going back, because if the new rule is no matter who gets into office, they get to jail their opponents, both past and current. We're no better than Putin's Moscow or Xi's Beijing, yes, or any of these other countries we're supposed to denounce every 6 days.
Well, that's funny because, I'm hearing from presidential historian Michael Beschloss right now that it's Donald Trump who's the fascist, that if Trump were to be elected, he's promising to fire federal employees, and therefore he would be a dictator. I mean, this is a serious case of projection going on here.
Well, this president of the United States is trying to jail his predecessor and his current opponent in the presidential campaign. It's never happened before, and he's being and as I said, the charges are pretextual, novel applications of the law, which suggests they're not being made in good faith. And I'm being charitable here. This is a hijacking of our justice system by political operatives in the Justice Department. The veil's been lifted, and I tell you, members of Congress who continue to pretend this isn't a big deal, continue to fund the Justice Department and these criminal operations, and I don't mean operations targeting criminals, I mean government operations that are criminal given their violations of the civil rights of Trump and other Americans. There are a lot of folks who need to be held accountable here, and Republicans need to get their act together and decide whether or not they're going to let their party be destroyed by the federal government.
Matt Gaetz made an announcement earlier today to the point that you're talking about. Here's Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz on defunding Jack Smith.
In the coming hours, the coming days, I will be introducing legislation under my name in the House of Representatives as a freestanding bill to defund the Jack Smith investigation. And one reason why is the election interference feature. Another reason why, the lack of transparency. I have sent correspondence to the Attorney General. I just want to know who's on the Jack Smith team.
And he's not getting answers. Do you want to see other lawmakers join Matt Gaetz in this legislation?
Well, yeah, I do think defunding Jack Smith. What are the tools available to Congress to rein in out of control and prosecutors at the federal level abusing their power? It's the power of the purse.
Yes.
And, and certainly we've asked for the names of Jack Smith's team. They've told us it's a secret, and we're in federal court over it.
How could it be a secret?
And
how could that be a secret? How could the public be kept from that information?
Well, they pretend there's a privacy interest in these senior prosecutors trying to jail a president for the first time in history. And we all know why they want to keep it secret, because almost certainly their Democrats are connected to Democrats, donors to Democrats, or activists from the left, and Yes. They don't want that coming out to further undermine their Get Trump jihad.
At least one of them, the ABC News cobbled together a list of some of the people they know are on the team, and at least one of the men is a Biden donor. He donated to Joe Biden in 2020. He's on Jack Smith's team, and again, this is in a normal country, that person would have to recuse himself from such an investigation, and yet here he is, a primary player in the persecution of Joe Biden's top political opponent.
And in the end, it's Joe Biden's problem, right? Or it's his responsibility. So he's going to let his Justice Department, he can shut this prosecution down. He can shut down the prosecution of Trump in Florida, but he's chosen not to. And complicity equals collusion in my view here, and Joe Biden's ultimately responsible for this. So Jack Smith wouldn't be able to do it. Garland wouldn't be able to do it if Biden didn't say, you go ahead and you prosecute my opponent, as if that's normal, as if that doesn't have international ramifications. What does Putin think? What do our allies think when they see the leading candidate for the presidency being threatened with arrest again? They recognize it, but they don't recognize it as the American way. They recognize it as, oh, well, America's lost its way.
It also is kind of a commentary on what they think the American right is willing to tolerate, isn't it? When they keep pursuing things like this. My view is that it's very destabilizing for our country. So if Joe Biden was trying to quote, heal our country, be the unity guy, as he promised in his inauguration, wouldn't he drop these charges or often offer some sort of blanket pardon for Trump so that they can't be pursued at all? And yet we're not getting that. They're not trying to bring the temperature down. They're only trying to lift it.
No, I think there's a rising communist cadre within the Democratic Party and the left board here in Washington, D.C., and so the typical rules of behavior, respect for our separation of powers and the Constitution and the civil rights of your political opponents, all of that, they don't feel any need to follow or pretend to follow those rules anymore. So I think these are dangerous times for our republic, and I just hope cooler heads prevail.
Yes,
because this is how you lose a republic.
No question.
We don't want to turn into, I don't know. I can't think of a comparable major power that does this other than China and Russia. I really can't.
Yes, and those of us who want to see our republic defended should stand up for it, I think, because it's worth preserving and keeping. And boy, these guys can't be thrown out of office soon enough. Tom Fitton, really appreciate your time today, as always. Thank you so much for joining us today, sir.
You're welcome, Vince. Thank you.
Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch.